nation's one of the Sri Lankan suicide bombers studied in Australia. New South Wales police make a global appeal to track down a suspected killer. A Newcastle man faces court accused of making a hoax threat against an international flight. And the night's big guns do some soul-searching before the clash with the Eels.
There's definitely not a lack of desire. There's a bunch of boys here that don't care and want to win.
This is NBN News with Paul Lobb.
Good evening. 3 days after a series of horrific explosions ripped through Sri Lanka, ISIL has claimed responsibility for the blasts. As more details emerge, Sri Lankan authorities say one of the suicide bombers previously studied in Australia. It comes as families begin burying the 359 people killed, including the Australian father who lost his wife and daughter.
A personal grief shared by many, a small community united in the grim task of burying a mother and daughter. Manik Suriyarachi and 10-year-old Alexandria were killed at the St. Sebastian Church on Sunday. As their coffins were placed side by side in a cemetery near the family's village, a broken Sadesh colony held together by family and friends watched his wife and little girl laid to rest. An indescribable grief for a husband and father whose loved ones were taken by a brutal act of violence. Australian relatives just happened to be in Sri Lanka to visit the family.
I never thought that I will come to Sri Lanka to say goodbye to their bodies. It's very unbearable for the whole family.
And on such a sad day, this hopeful plea.
I kindly ask everyone to act as humans and not to kill anyone. We are all humans.
The nation's president inspected the devastation at the St. Sebastian Church in Negombo, where Manik and Alexandria were killed. But this was also a national day of mourning, a day when many buried their dead. Islamic State has now claimed responsibility, releasing a video claiming to show the attackers pledging allegiance to the terrorist group. New images have emerged of those suicide bombers, here two with backpacks in a lift at the Shangri-La Hotel before walking into the crowded breakfast buffet, and another calmly walking along the street and courtyard in Negombo before entering the church. And now there are claims by Sri Lanka's junior defence minister that one of the suicide bombers completed his postgraduate studies in Australia, raising concerns about the potential tentacles spread while he was there. The Prime Minister says they suspected two homegrown Islamic extremist groups had foreign links, warning more militants and explosives are still at large, among them Sri Lankans who've returned from fighting in Syria.
We are trying to apprehend them. People who are on the run. So far we've been successful in apprehending many of them.
And again today, a controlled explosion, police taking no chances with a suspicious moped parked near a cinema. And a theory for why Sri Lanka was targeted.
It's possible it could have been because of the Christchurch attacks. We cannot say here.
New Zealand's Prime Minister played it down.
I have seen reports of those statements. We haven't received anything officially, nor have we received any intelligence reports that corroborate what has been said in Sri Lanka.
But with numerous warnings ignored, the Sri Lankan president has announced a restructuring of the country's police, security and defence authorities, promising stern action.
The hunt for one of Australia's most wanted men has gone global, with New South Wales police tracking him to Greece. 48-year-old James Delamangas is accused of the stabbing murder of Sydney father of two, George Giannopoulos. Now, 2 decades on, his family has spoken exclusively to NBN News about the anger and loss that still burns.
It's been 20 years, but the pain is just as raw. If I was to see him or he's listening to this, either fess up or rot in hell.
One of Australia's most wanted men, James Delamangas, is still on the run in Greece. Police allege he fatally stabbed George Giannopoulos, who was trying to intervene in an argument inside a Sydney nightclub on Anzac Day in 1999. His sister Tula has never forgotten.
My brother was the a loving son, brother, fantastic father, and an amazing husband to his wife. Great Greek boy.
Today, New South Wales Police announced a $200,000 reward to anyone who provides information which leads to an arrest.
We strongly believe that there are people who reside in Australia that do know where Dalamangas currently is. This reward also extends to people living in Greece and abroad.
Dalamangas is a suspect in the 1997 murder of a King's Cross bouncer. A year later, he was involved in a brawl at Star City Casino, where his brother Peter was killed.
I don't want to see some results, I want to see some justice, I want to see the truth.
In 2003, the Greek government refused a request to extradite Dalamangas back to Australia, but they've agreed to prosecute him in Greece if he's ever arrested there. His family, including his son and daughter, now wait and hope.
Doesn't have to be an anniversary or a birthday. It's just constant with my parents, you know. No parent ever wants to bury their child.
Emma Partridge, NBN News.
A man has died after a three-car crash on the mid-north coast. A Mitsubishi Triton collided with two Holden Rodeos on Warrimby Road near Nambucca Heads this morning. One of the oncoming vehicles stopped just in time to avoid rolling down an embankment. Witnesses performed CPR on the 69-year-old driver of the Triton, but he couldn't be revived. Police are investigating whether he suffered a medical episode. The drivers of the other two vehicles have undergone mandatory testing. It's been a day of blunders in the federal election campaign. It started with activist group Get Up begging for forgiveness after taking its propaganda too far.
Help! This is the Get Up ad that it now doesn't want you to see.
Tony! Someone's drowning!
Ridiculing Tony Abbott's views on climate change.
Look, I think you'll find that the science isn't settled on that.
Released days after father and son volunteer lifesavers Ross and Andrew Powell drowned, and attacking a man who spent more than 20 years as a lifesaver.
It was unbelievably tacky.
Get Up pulled the ad, but the left-wing activist group, which demands accountability from others, refused to be interviewed, instead releasing a statement apologising for the insensitivity of the timing and subject matter.
They should never have thought it was a smart thing to demean the work of Australia's 150,000 or so volunteer lifesavers.
The opposition leader agreed,
Grossly disrespectful.
but the government pounced on this exchange.
One of the guys here who they earn $250,000 a year because they work nights.
Well, we're going to look at that. Bill Shorten has said he'll review taxes for high-income earners, but those earning more than $180,000 a year will have their effective tax rate lifted from 47 to 49 cents in the dollar if Labor is elected.
He's not being straight with people. He's not being truthful.
The opposition leader says his plans are public and that the coalition's high-income tax relief is 5 years off and carries a big price tag.
They want to give an $11,000 an annual tax cut to millionaires and $11 a week to most people.
There is a big choice to be made at this election about how taxes are raised and spent.
Our plan is to lower taxes for families and small businesses.
What I won't say to workers is that I'll give you a tax cut and then cut your hospitals and your schools at the same time.
There will be another campaign truce for Anzac Day. Chris Ullman, NBN News.
It rears its head every election, but the Glendale interchange is still yet to be completed. Labor today renewed a promise to get the job done.
Labor politicians pledging to rewrite a cheque for the Pennant Street Bridge, part of the Glendale interchange. It was originally written by Labor in 2013 before being ousted from government.
It has the highest benefit to cost ratio of any project I've seen. $94 of benefit for every dollar of investment.
The Shadow Minister for Infrastructure spruiking a $32 million funding plan from the state election, $13 million from Canberra, matched by New South Wales, and $6 million from Lake Macquarie Council. Given the ALP's loss in March, a federal Labor government would need to convince Gladys Berejiklian to come to the party.
This will be one of the first issues that I raise with them.
Lake Macquarie is growing, it's a beautiful place, it's livable, it's affordable, and without this this important link, we can't continue with our economic development.
There will be hundreds of jobs in the construction phase, but more importantly is the economic potential. An independent study found that there'll be up to 10,000 jobs created.
Meanwhile, ballot papers were drawn up across the country today. At Charlestown, Labor's Sharon Clayton drew top spot in Newcastle. For Shortland, that went to Sustainable Australia candidate Susan Newbury. Georgia Marr, NBN News.
2 nurses have had their registrations revoked over the death of a Newcastle teenager who took her own life in a mental health unit in 2015. The Healthcare Complaints Commission today handed down findings against 4 nurses responsible for caring for Alia Raftery.
Alia Raftery was just 18 when she died at the Marta Mental Health Centre. In a scathing set of findings handed down by the Healthcare Complaints Commission, the tribunal found 4 nurses failed to adequately care for the teenager. One in particular was described as having displayed a breathtaking lack of insight and an even more disturbing lack of understanding. Alia took her own life in the psychiatric intensive care unit in March 2015. Her body was found at around 7:30 in the morning. Despite giving evidence that he spoke to Alia at around 6 a.m. and that he walked past her on several occasions, the Commission ultimately found the experienced nurse did just that and little more. The tribunal ruled that not only did he not accept the magnitude and seriousness of his errors, he also didn't believe he'd done anything wrong at all. Among the punishments handed down, the Commission revoked the registrations of 2 nurses and ordered another not to work in a mental health unit for 2 years. A 4th nurse was ordered to pay costs. Alia's family has welcomed the decisions. Tyson Cottrell, NBN News.
And if you or anyone you know needs help or support, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14.